everybody, this is Robin with Creative2xmom, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you what we read in the month of December. So welcome back to my channel. My name is Robin and this is Creative2xmom. This channel is all about homeschooling, parenthood, and thriving in the day-to-day. And in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you all the books that we read in the month of December. There are quite a few here. We live in a pretty moderate climate, so we tend to get out quite a bit during the day, but as you all know, it is getting dark ridiculously early. So by the time I've played a game with the kids, cleaned up the kitchen, done a few things around the house, it's only 6:30 and it's really dark. So I got quite a bit of reading done in December. I was also chasing my daughter from Nutcracker rehearsals to recital rehearsals to all over the place. She was so busy in December. So I always had a book with me in case I was sitting in the car waiting or sitting at a rehearsal reading. I got a lot more reading done than I thought I was going to in this busy season. I was looking at my list thinking, wow, that's crazy. So I have about, let me see if I counted them. I made a list. Oh man, probably 7 or 8 books to share with you here. Maybe not quite that much, but quite a few. So let's just jump into what we read in December. Now, the first book I read was a review book. It was Christmas at the Amish Market by Shelley Shepherd Gray. This is the story of a young couple. The young man works at his parents' Amish market, and his dad has had some health problems, so they have gone away during the busiest time of the year. They know there's going to be lots of tourists in the store, and his girlfriend comes up with the bright idea to invite her aunt to come work at the store, and he's thinking this elderly spinster aunt. Well, she arrives and she is right at his age and sparks start to fly. So you have this love triangle going on, plus there's a little bit of a side romance going on that they don't even know about as well. So we've got this complication between this young man and the aunt as they are trying to navigate working together and yet not becoming too familiar with each other. It's cute, it's lighthearted, it's a good seasonal read. I have had mixed feelings about this author in the past. She's not my favorite Amish fiction writer, but I think probably what the problem has been is that I've read a lot of her short stories or her novellas, and she just didn't have time to develop the characters like she did in this book. This book made me really question whether or not I like her, because this was a good title and a good one to read throughout the winter months. I will link my full review down below. The next book that I read in December was Start With Hello by Shannon Martin. Now, I heard about this book on a podcast, I can't remember which one, and at the time I was thinking, oh, this looks so good. I definitely want to read that book. It's basically about how do you create community? How do you create community in a world where everyone pulls their cars into the driveway, rushes indoors, gets on social media and tries to believe that that is their community, which is a very false community, as a lot of us know. So how do you get out of your home and create community within your neighborhood? I was so excited to read this one. And then I started reading it. And I think it was like chapter 2. I was already turned off. This is a book that poses as a how-to for creating community, talks about creating community, but the author was so judgmental, condescending. I was not impressed with this book at all. I felt like it had a political, maybe not political agenda, but definitely agenda that was posing as a community book and really wasn't one. Really was all about creating this agenda that this author had. I will link my full review down below, but I definitely wouldn't recommend Start With Hello. However, going from probably the worst book I read in December to the best book I read in December, let's talk about Divine Disruption. This was a reread for me, and it's written by Tony Evans and his 4 children. They, of course, all have very public ministries, whether from the pulpit or in music, and it's their story of how their family went through a really crazy year and a half of losing a lot of family members, culminating with Tony losing his wife in 2019. How they survived, it's their story of their mother's legacy, of what she taught them, of what she asked them to continue to do upon her death, and the lessons that they learned about God, about Christianity, about community, and about family. This was a reread for me because just through some personal family conflicts and some things that we are going through as a smaller family, I felt like I really needed this reminder of who God was, who God is to our children, who He is to our parents, and who He is to my husband and I. Of course, when I just say reread, you know it's going to be good. It was originally a review book, but I loved it so much that I have read it multiple times. Okay, finally, a physical book that's not on my Kindle, and that is Mr. Dickens and His Carol by Samantha Silva. This is a fictionalized version of Charles Dickens and how he went about creating his Christmas Carol book. There's a lot of liberties that were taken in this story, and at first I didn't think I was going to like it. Charles Dickens is not a very likable character in this book. He is sort of gruff. He's not a very good family man. He doesn't have very good values. He's not very good with his kids. And so the first few chapters were hard for me to get through because I did not like the main character. If you have ever watched The Man Who Invented Christmas, there are some similarities to that fictionalized version, and then there are, of course, some differences. So don't think that it's going to be like the movie. I kind of went into it thinking it was going to be, and there was a side story romance that threw me off. Initially, I didn't know what to do with it. Cute story, good seasonal read. It's a good one to pick up in December. I don't know that it's one that I would say, oh, you have to read this. But for the winter months, for curling up with a good book, she did a really good job of crafting a story and making it believable. So I shared in my winter reading list that my library brought in a whole bunch of new releases. I made a list because there were so many of them on that shelf that I wanted to read. And the first one I picked up was All You Need Is Love by Tanya Guerrero. Again, I've kind of been trying to work my way through some of these titles to see good authors to recommend to my 11-year-old, good stories to recommend to my 11-year-old, and typically I enjoy a good middle school read. However, with this one, I think I got a third of the way through the book and I just thought, it's not worth my time. So many other titles started pulling my attention and I kept thinking, I'm going to go back to this one, I'm going to go back to it, and I just didn't do it. So about a third of the way through the book, there were a couple of red flags for me. If you do decide to pass this one off to your middle schooler, there's talk of spousal abuse within this book, which I think is a topic that can be addressed and maybe in some ways should be addressed. But that's just was a red flag for me that if I did pass it off to my middle schooler, I wanted to discuss those things with him. The other thing that came up really early on in the book, within the first couple chapters, was some identity issues, some just how do you identify, who do you think you are, and again, for that middle school age, I don't know that that's entirely appropriate, although that is being discussed and that is a reality, especially if your kids go to public school. But I think that is a red flag that as a parent, you should be having those conversations with your kids because they are coming up in books for that age. So just wanted to give you a heads up on a few things that I noticed in this title. Kind of an interesting story. It's about a little girl who goes to live with her grandma in Spain because her parents are, of course, having issues, and how she works out some of her internal conflict through working in a bakery. The mentorship, as far as I got in the book, the mentorship was very healthy, and the relationships that she was having in Spain seemed very healthy, but again, I didn't finish it. The last book that I personally read in the month of December was Mother Culture by Karen Andriola, and I shared that I was really excited for this title because I love her Charlotte Mason companion. This one was not as good. I've heard so many good things about Mother Culture that I hesitate to be too critical, but I just felt like it was so idealistic Whereas with Charlotte Mason Companion, yes, it's very loose, it's very open for interpretation, but there's also a lot of practical things within that title. Mother Culture, I felt like, was just very idealistic, and I kept looking for those practical application ideas to help me wrap my brain around it. I've spoken before how I love Charlotte Mason, but it gets so outside of my box that I sometimes need something concrete to help me grab a hold of it. And Mother Culture just did not have that. I don't know if it's because I read it quickly, I was under a time crunch because it's a library book, or if it just wasn't as good. So I hesitate to be very critical, but for my brain, it was just a tough one to wrap my mind around. And what I think would be interesting would be to check this out later and maybe read through it slowly like Charlotte Mason Companion and do the reflective questions at the end of every chapter. That's one thing I love about Karen Andriel is she gives you questions to think on and ponder on at the end of every chapter. I think maybe I will try that again, possibly over next summer, and just do some journaling with the questions and get really reflective on it. But as far as just reading and getting applicable ideas, they weren't there, and so I struggled with this one. I wanted to like it so much, but it was just sort of not good, not bad, just not my favorite. And the last book that I'm going to share today is The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. This was a reread for us. This was our read aloud in the month of December. I have spoken about this title so many times, you're probably sick of hearing it, but I wanted to make a quick mention on it because we really do love this title. If you have not heard about it before, put it on your read aloud list for next December. Super short. In fact, it ended up being shorter than I even remembered. I thought it was 10 chapters, and then I think when we jumped into it in December, it was only 7 chapters. So it's very easy to read throughout a busy holiday season. So what is coming up in the month of January 2023? How in the world did that happen? Well, our read aloud that we are jumping into right now is Echo Mountain by Lauren Wolk. I know for sure we're going to be reading that. I don't know if we will finish that in January because it's a little bit of a longer read aloud than we've had in a while. For my personal fiction, I'm going to be reading We Are Wolves by Katrina Nanestead. I am maybe 5 chapters into this one. I picked it up during a dance rehearsal and couldn't put it down. I'm liking it so far, and so I will share in January how it turns out. And then for my nonfiction, I think I'm going to start The Resolution for Women by Priscilla Shirer. That one is due for review pretty quickly in January, and because of the author, I'm really excited to read that title. Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you're reading. Have you gotten a lot of reading in since the days are short currently? Or have you been just way too busy with the holiday season? I am excited to jump into some new books as our schedule slows down. I hope you guys enjoy this one, and we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.